Welcome, y'all. It is February 5th, 2023, and we are having a talk with Patrick Jordan. Last time we have covered vitamin A and vitamin B1. I'm just gonna do a little recap of vitamin A. There is no free source of vitamin A in plant form. And Patrick, if I miss something, just correct me. Carotenes are precursors of alpha, beta, and gamma carotenes. You need good bile for it to be transported. Vitamin A is fat soluble. You turn orange if eating lots of carrots because you are unable to process beta carotene due to genetic damage. It can become a waste product and toxin. And from B1 deficiency is berry. Garlic is a good source of B1. As of this recording, Metabolics is the only company making thiamine pyrophosphate absorbable form. They are in the UK, that's metabolics.com. Was it a polio or was it B1 deficiency? B deficiency affects on the nervous system. Page 452 of your B vitamins. Page is thiamine decreases fear, mood, vague feeling of unease, disorderly thinking, depression. And let's go over and read the B vitamins. There's a whole list of those because I knew only of B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, and B12. And then later on, I found out about B17, but there is a whole lot of different vitamin Bs. So let's tackle them down. B1 is thiamine. B2, riboflavin or riboflavin pyrophosphate. No, riboflavin 5-phosphate. It is also listed as vitamin G. Vitamin B3, nicotinic acid, niacin, inositol, hexanicotinate, niacinamide, vitamin PP. Vitamin B4 is adenine or adenine. And Patrick, just jump in and correct me because some of these B's are tongue twisters. So B5, pantothenic acid. Oh, did we say B4? Yeah, B4 is adenine, purine base of DNA and RNA. Vitamin B5, pantothenic acid, panthenol, pantothenate, and pantothenine. B6 is pyridoxine, P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Vitamin B7 is biotin, vitamin H, I, or B, W. Coenzyme R, factors H, S, W, X. I have no idea what that is. Vitamin B8, adenolic acid, adenosine monophosphate, AMP. Ergadenolic acid, vitamin B9, folic acid, methyl tetrahydrofolate, petroleglutamic acid, vitamin M, BC, vitamin B10, pyraminobenzoic acid or PABA, vitamin R or BX, vitamin B11, I never heard of that one, salicylic acid, well, I heard about that one. Then we have B12. Oh, let me read the rest of it, what is on B11 actually. Salicylic acid, factor S, has nothing whatsoever in common with pteroheptaglutamic acid, the growth factor that is polyglutamate of folic acid. Pteropterine is triglutamic acid that is gotten from aerobic culture of diphtheria and used to be an anti-cancer drug. Really. B12, everybody knows B12 is cyanocobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, methylcobalamin, and adenosylcobalamin. These are different forms of B12. B13, orotic acid, not erotic, OROTIC, in case my pronunciation is vague. Pyrimidine, no, you say that one because I twisted my tongue on that one.
Pyrimidine.
Pyrimidine carboxylic acid, yes. Cholamine phosphate, aspartic acid, mineral transport. B14, never heard of this one either. Pterine phosphate, B15. Pangamic acid, calcium pangamate, dimethylglycine, DMG, and gluconic acid. B16, B17, that's the latest one I've heard of. Laetrile. Laetrile.
Yeah.
Amygdalin, D-mandelonitrile glucoside, BH, vitamin BH, inositol, or B8, number 8. Inositol plus choline makes up lecithin. And the last one is BP, as a Peter, choline, vitamin J. Oh my goodness gracious, Patrick. And I thought these were simple.
If you don't mind, let me back up and just give a tiny bit of highlights, because precursor of what people are in. B4, adenine. See, adenine is, if people have heard of the base pairs that make up DNA and RNA, you got guanine, cytosine, adenine, and, oh boy, ACTG. Guanine, cytosine, adenine. I can't do it from memory. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, this makes me look like an idiot. But the adenine part is one of those, it's part of the skeleton that makes up the DNA and RNA. But they're literally calling this one, and see, I don't want to get too far out in left field, but everybody's heard of SV40. Oh, simian virus number 40, it was found in the polio shot. And it's like, well, if there were 40 of them, what about the other ones? And I think there was like a total of 70. But then they kind of pared it down because it's like, oh, well, we thought this was a different one, but it's the same one. And so we just eliminated that one as, part of the cast of thousands. So just like in the vitamins, they labeled vitamin B4 adenine, and it turns out to be, is it really a vitamin, or is it just a base pair for making up our genetic code? Let's see, cytosine. Oh, cytosine, ATC. Oh, thymine. So thiamine is the it's the vitamin, but thymine. We should fact check me. Let's do that, because I don't care. I don't care if I'm fact checked. Let's go and make sure the spelling's right, because accuracy is everything.
Oh, absolutely. You have a different ending, and you have completely different molecular structure of the element.
Thymine, one of the 4 nucleobases in the nucleic acid of DNA. Okay, so, it's just, again, I don't get enough sleep, and so I'm trying to do this from memory, and sometimes Mr. Memory ain't there. He disappears like, a ghost.
Well,
so we're on track. Okay, it just makes me sound like an idiot, but I don't care about that either.
Well, I was thinking of covering B2, B3, we just did B4, B5, and B6 and folate. So I would go up to folate, unless, you will elaborate more on any of these. But let me go back to the material you have sent me. B vitamins, the page 450. It says fluorescent light depletes B vitamins. How?
And see, to explain what I did in my books, because it was explained in my books, what I had done is I went through tons of, let's just call it alternative medicine reference material. A lot of it was based on what Rodale Press had put out, because they wrote extensively on vitamins. And I would just do a data dump and put things out there. Now, I've met people that literally cannot be in the same room with fluorescent lights because it will either make them faint, or make them feel ill, or give them, I call it the mind wipe, where you just absolutely cannot think. And so when I come across stuff like that, I'm going to put it in the book. And here's the thing, when you write books that are 740 pages long, unless you're an academic and you only want to put out one book every 10 years, you cannot reference every single thing that you put in the book. So because of my experience with fluorescent light and other people's experience with fluorescent light, when I read, and it was in a book that was in popular print, it said B vitamins deplete, fluorescent light depletes B vitamins. Bam, it's in the book. And why? Because it's the cautionary principle. It's better to warn people of a possibility than it is to hold back until you got proof. Because here's the problem with all of controlled science. It was the CDC that said, yeah, there were like, I forget what the number was. It was ghastly. Let's just say 98 million people that were exposed to SV40 in the polio shot. And SV40 is a known monkey cancer virus. In fact, SV40 is part of the herpes series. And they said, yeah, it was in there, but we don't have any evidence that it caused cancer. Now, see, those are weasel words by the controllers. We don't have any evidence doesn't mean that there isn't evidence. And it also means that they didn't do the tests. Because when you're criminally liable, if you did the test and you had the evidence, then they could put these people away for life. But they didn't do the test, so they claim they have no evidence, and they said, well, it's not likely that you got cancer from the shot, but we identified it and we took it out anyway.
Hmm. And there is actually a reference in your, on the page 451. Well, we have also seen that vaccines damage at a chromosomal level with or without the aid of caramel coating inhibits vitamin pathways. This damage can lead to the inability to phosphorylate the synthetic vitamins up to their active and useful form by hooking on phosphorus. So vaccine damage, I mean, that's why a lot of people are unable to process vitamin supplements and even regular food.
Let's back up because you got it. You got the entire picture. Because of this vaccine damage, we can't process food. That's where you start. That's the foundation. Now let's build some more bricks with some solid mortar. Then you need artificial vitamins that we established earlier. Anything that comes out of a bottle or a needle is akin to a drug. Mm-hmm. Because your vitamins actually come from your food, but you can't process the vitamins. So you go to these, I'm just going to say it, alternative medicine drugs. And then you could be so genetically damaged that you can't even process those. And that's about 1% of the population. And I'm going to tell you something. When you go to an internet guru, or anybody that's popular, they don't have to be in social media. Any health guru, you go to them, 80% of the people that show up there will see benefit from whatever these people do, even if it's like waving a headless chicken at them. The other 19% will either not get benefit or not feel well from that intervention. And that's called paradoxical reaction. We learned that from an autism law. The other 1%, they can't eat food, it makes them ill. They can't take supplements, it makes them ill. They can't live life, it makes them ill. And so that 19 and 1%, so 20% of the population these are the people that come to me because that, the guru stuff doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So so you had jumped to, and what page were you on?
I was referring to on page 453. I was reading on B2 riboflavin.
And what's the title of that PDF?
Oh, that is B vitamins. Oh, hold on a second. I was referring on page. Talking about the vaccines. That was
452?
451. I was gonna jump to 452 and start talking about the riboflavin.
Don't jump there yet. I want to make a point, and that's why I brought up the whole SV40 thing.
Okay.
With the naming of the vitamins. And so tell me again where you were looking at on 451.
451 related to vaccines. It's a second paragraph.
Yeah, I just want to be on the same page with you. Okay.
It's probably
and I wanted to bring this out. You said something about caramelization. Was that in there?
Yes, that's a fourth sentence. Having had no knowledge early on, I also discovered that B12 has totally useless because of first paragraph. Well, we have also seen that vaccines damage at the chromosomal level with or without the aid of caramel coating inhibits vitamins pathways. This damage can lead to the inability to phosphorylate the synthetic vitamin up to their active and useful form by hooking on phosphorus.
Okay, so here's what people need to know. So we're setting the foundation. And what this is, and somebody actually took my word, because I was in a band called Iconoclast, and these were the people that would come into churches and they would literally just tear the churches apart because they thought the iconography, whether it was statues or silver or gold crosses, were blasphemy. And they would just like trash the places. That's what an iconoclast was. And I was in a band called Iconoclast, and I posted on somebody's flat earth. What we're trying to do here is create a foundation, because everything we've ever learned was a lie. So we have to work on our own personal experience, what we know in science that works, because science is not a bad word. Science has been turned into a whore to the highest bidder, but it's not a bad word. It works for us. And so when we build this foundation, it's like we have been so damaged that we can't even process food. We have been so damaged that we have to go to synthetic supplements to get us over whatever health crisis that we're in. But then when you brought this up, and I love talking with Little Red Hens because you're so insightful. This single paragraph here, this single sentence, where did it go? How did I get back to that one? Where it talks about the chromosome damage. If you eat caramelized food, so people know about caramel, it's a candy, okay? And when you put heat to like sugars, the thing that people understand is when you caramelize onions, if anybody's ever cooked onions, you're frying them on the stovetop and they get brown and they taste really sweet, that's caramelization. But caramelization also happens when you got that really nice juicy steak on a barbecue and you're cooking it, and the proteins, the amino acids, the fats, the sugars can caramelize as well. Well, this Rodale Press material claimed that one of the main reasons why our chromosomes have breaks in them, it's called chromosome breakage, is from caramelization in food. And so while we're blaming vaccines, which are, that is the number one reason for genetic damage, the way that food is prepared can also, according to Rodale Press, cause harm to our chromosomes. So even eating, we're trying to get vitamins from our food, but the food that we're eating can be damaged, and that damage then translates to the eater. And so this is what I'm saying. We got to be iconoclasts and completely destroy the foundation of everything anybody ever thought they knew, and realize that your food is compromised, vaccines will compromise you, and that vitamins it's a stopgap, it's a palliative. It's like, oh my God, we got to do something now because we ain't making it kind of thing. But what we're trying to do is restore health to the point where if you ate good food, you would get everything you needed from that. That's my takeaway message.
And I like what you make a point when you mention with each vitamin, pretty much. Vitamins are drugs, even if they are promoted as being natural or organic. Here are the side effects from thiamine overdose. Stomach upset, intravenous or intramuscular shots can be sensitized towards anaphylaxis. So people will ask, so well, what is the good level? What is the proper level of the vitamin B1 or B2? Well, it depends on the individual. And exactly. I think it looks like you're trying to make sure that people understand that when you start having these side effects, you knew that you have overdosed yourself on a supplement. So you need to back off.
Let's do this now, because repetition actually helps people. When we get to B6, which is P5P, you know, and here again, a Babylonian name change. Well, which one is it? Two different chemistries. One is inactive, the other one's active. When we get to B6 and vitamin C, if you take large amounts of this stuff, it causes genetic upregulation. What that means is if you take mega doses of vitamin C because some guru told you to, your body will say, oh, this is my new set point. You know, it used to be, let's say for the sake of argument, because this is the clinical measured dose. If you take more than 250 milligrams, now listen to me, this is mgs, 250 milligrams, your body cannot use any more of that, and so it'll probably shunt it into the oxalate pathway, or you'll excrete it in your urine, and it can't be like recycled with things like selenium and glutathione. So there's a limit of how much vitamin C that your body can process at any one given time. And so when you're throwing like, you know, grams of this stuff, so a milligram versus a gram, then your body says, oh, I need more of this, and it will upregulate the need for it, so that if any time you run out of money, you get bored with it, or you forget, if you had reset your requirement for vitamin C from 250 milligrams per day to 10 grams a day, whenever you drop below 10 grams, that's your new set point, you can literally show the effects of scurvy. That's from genetic upregulation. And the only way out of that with B6 and vitamin C is to slowly, over time, very slowly, reduce your amount of intake of these mega dosing vitamins and get the genetics to downregulate that need for it. And then you can get back to quote unquote normal.
So you mentioned vitamin B's and C's.
Right, for upregulation. It's a danger. Because, see, this is the other thing. If you follow guru without knowing biochemistry, physiology, physiochemistry, you can get into danger. So the gurus are saying, well, you need vitamin C, you need like lots and lots and lots. And just today I did a show with Sha Lee, and he said he came across a paper where Rockefeller actually funded who was the guy that's famous for shooting up vitamin C? Absolutely, Linus Pauling. He funded Linus Pauling to tell everybody that they needed vitamin C, and that raises so many flags, because think about it. This is what I'm trying to convey to people about this whole vitamin gambit. Linus Pauling claimed that you needed, and listen to the numbers, 40 grams of vitamin C in your blood. And vitamin C, ascorbic acid, is acidic. It would etch your blood vessels. So they had to buffer it. But they were putting in, you know, as a final dose, 40 grams of vitamin C. But if you knew what it was in the days of seafaring, you know, the whole idea of the limey, which is, again, okay, so this is, I'm sorry that I keep, like, you know, backpedaling like a YouTube video, but they weren't really eating limes. They weren't taking limes in when the British were, doing their ocean voyages. It was lemons. And so I think it was, don't quote me on this, maybe 18 to 25 milligrams. And I'm going to repeat this because it's so blatant, it's so scary. 18 to 25 milligrams. No, wait. So that's like, I think it was 75 milligrams in a lemon could turn around frank scurvy, which is, according to Albert St. Georgi, is the guy that what's the word that I want? Because I can't say words that aren't true. He didn't discover vitamin C. He isolated and described vitamin C. So this Hungarian scientist isolated vitamin C as ascorbic acid from paprika peppers. And he said, by the time you show signs of scurvy, you're already circling the drain on the way to death. So these seafarers in the British Army were taking, and I'm pretty sure now because I hate numbers and doing it from memory, 75 milligrams of vitamin C to turn around frank scurvy. And Linus Pauling, probably several hundred years later, is saying, oh, you need 40 grams. So a gram is 1,000 milligrams. You need 40 grams of vitamin C just to be well. So nobody ever asked, well, what happened to the human body that 75 milligrams used to heal scurvy, but now we need 40? Nobody's ever asked that because they have the occulter personality and they worship Linus Pauling and they go for their IV infusions. And then what happens? That set point, that upregulation happens, and now they have to be on vitamin C for life unless they do the weaning. So it's an industrial shuck and jive that literally creates patients for life. And we're talking alternative medicine. This isn't like I'm blaming allopaths in white coats. These are the cousins of the allopaths that were waiting for us patiently to come to them because allopathy wasn't working.
Yep.
Let's see. So, and we were talking about C, B6, upregulation, Linus Pauling, Rockefeller. I'm trying to make sure that I closed all the threads on that because I want to come back to the SV40 thing. SV40, I think there was, like 47. Well, when you sorted through all 70 of the simian viruses and simian agents, there were, I'm just going to say it, I hate numbers, 47 of these dangers, these cancer-causing dangers in the polio shot that came from monkey guts. That's the best way to say it. So monkey guts gave you 47 viruses, and SV40 was one of them. And they started renaming things because it's like, oh, this one looks like this one. Oh, we made a mistake here. And my favorite is we lost the samples. So they isolated something, lost the sample, and then said, okay, well, screw that. Just take that out of the count. So vitamin B7 is biotin. People should know biotin. Well, it used to be called vitamin H. Oh, wait, it used to be called vitamin I. Wait, it used to be called vitamin BW, and that's lowercase w. Coenzyme R. Factors H, factors S, factors W, factors X. And so which one is it? Well, when they finally arrived at a what is that? A system for codifying this, then they finally said, let's just call it B7. But they had all these previous names to it because all these independent researchers were working on, well, what is biotin? And then they had to tease it out from everything else, isolate it, test it, find its properties, its chemical makeup, and whatever other things that they needed to know about it. And you got, okay, so it's like B7, biotin, vitamin H, I, BW, coenzyme R, H, S, W, X. That's 10 different names for the same thing. And so I made this list that you had read through for the express purpose of showing how confused science was on the way to codifying stuff, how confused science remains, because the man and woman off the street doesn't even know what B7 is. The man and woman off the street doesn't even know what biotin is. All they know is, oh, I read an article, or the really nice lady at the health food store says, honey, biotin is the hair and nails vitamin, and it's really good if you want lush hair and strong fingernails, and so they take it. They don't know the other properties, and we'll go into that later, but people don't know the chemistry. And if you don't know the chemistry, then you can run into, like I said, with the genetic upregulations, you can run into some trouble. So where did you want to go with this? Did you say you want to start with
yeah, with B2.
Okay, and always tell me which. For our listeners, I made a bunch of excerpts from my books that had to do specifically with vitamins, and I've got 3 of them going on right now, and I need to know what page you're on so I can literally be on the same page.
Sure. 453, B2 riboflavin. Riboflavin metabolizes fat, protein, and carb. Affects TSH. What is TSH?
Thyroid stimulating
hormone. And insulin. Part of the liver activation of B6. Those cracks in the sides of your mouth where your upper and lower lip crease. Riboflavin deficiency.
It's called cheleosis. And so, sorry for interrupting.
No.
What I want people to understand is that, you had started off with the whole thing where I stalled when we're doing the vitamin A thing. It's like, okay, tell us the signs and symptoms of vitamin A deficiency. And I did the whole thing. Well, before we talk about that, we got to talk about why we're deficient. You got bad bile. When you have cracks, and I mean, they're just brutal, where your upper lip meets your lower lip, right in that crease, right at the corner of your mouth, that is a sign of riboflavin deficiency. It's called cheleosis. And I had it once because, I was exposed to every chemical known to man, and it will deplete your B vitamins. In fact, some of the farm chemicals that were sprayed on the fields that I used to work for my neighbor were, are you ready for this?
Yes. B
vitamin inhibitors in plants. And that was my first clue to why I was so sick, because wait, if plants use B vitamins and humans use B vitamins, and I've just been exposed to an inhibitor, then that explains why I could not function without a daily or sometimes triple daily dose of B complex. And so if you look at like the metabolic maintenance ingredient list, like we did in a previous video, you'll see everything that they put in there, but those were just the names. You and I never went to what the percentage, the daily value was, and some of those were in like thousands times the recommended daily dose. And what I'm trying to convey to everybody is I was so poisoned that I had to take 3 times the RDA, three times the labeled dose, which was often thousands of times the RDA dose, just to survive farming. That's what these chemicals can do to you.
Now, do I remember correctly once before you mentioned that certain vitamins should not be combined together? And why would they then make a B complex? Or if you combine proper forms of Bs together, then you can have B complex.
There are certain things like metal minerals where they claim that there are. See, in Latin, agonist helps, antagonist doesn't. So there are antagonist relationships between metals when they're taken at the same time. I'm not quite aware of any B antagonism. And this is a perfect time to do it because, we didn't set this up before when we started with B1.
Mm-hmm.
And B1, of course, was the first B vitamin that they studied and named and got all the properties for. Before they were ever called B vitamins, they were called yeast growth factors,
Mm-hmm.
which means yeast cannot function without this stuff. And so then that should turn everybody on their heads going, now, wait a minute. If you got a yeast infection, a yeast problem, the B vitamins do what? It feeds the yeast. It can't grow without them. And in fact, brewer's yeast is when you use it in a fermentation process to like make beer or whatever. And the leftover, the cake, the yeast is literally loaded with B vitamins. Why? Because it's part of the growth process of the yeast. Now, the worst thing that anybody that has a yeast infection can do is eat yeast, because then it gives it the cell wall components to make more yeast. And so I have, in all these years, I've been writing about this stuff since 2008. I have never found an answer to how B vitamins how taking B vitamins has an effect on the yeast growth within a human being. And I'm stalling because I'm trying to frame this so that people understand. If you have an infectious organism in your body and it has a food requirement, if you feed it instead of letting it eat you, then it's kind of like a détente. So if you take the B vitamins, are you actually feeding your own body, or are you feeding the yeast? Because yeast used to be, before the World War II, it used to be what was called a commensurate, meaning they sit down at the same table together. You eat the same things. Well, when you ate food and it was really high in cellulose, and anything that ends in OSE is a sugar. So fructose sugar, sucrose sugar, glucose sugar, lactose sugar, cellulose sugar, xylose sugar alcohol. Well, xylol is sugar alcohol, xylose is just sugar. But some of these things we can't metabolize. We can't break down cellulose. So yeast was actually, can we say it? Yeast back then, before World War II, was our friend. And only people that had like severe autoimmunity, immunosuppression, were subjected to yeast problems. But then after World War II and they weaponized everything and DARPA got their tabletop gene sequencers, all bets were off. And now literally Candida yeast, it's a dimorphic fungus. It has a budding and a hyphating morphology to it. The budding is like what you would have in bread and beer. That's the stuff that puts off CO2. It's what makes your bread rise. That's the budding form of yeast. And by the way, Saccharomyces is genetically almost identical to Candida. So, when the book in the 1980s, The Yeast Connection, came out, they were saying, don't eat anything with yeast in it. There's a reason, because you're literally giving the genetic and structural material to the Candida that you're trying to get rid of to make more of itself. And see, now we're back in Continuum to that question of, now, wait a minute. He said that B vitamins were yeast growth factors. So how is it that I can take a B vitamin and not feed the yeast? But then, see, I'm trying to bring people into this picture the way that it's in my mind. I see everything like, can I say the word globally? I see everything as the big picture all at once, but then when I have to convey it in words, I got to parse it out one item at a time. So yeast has a budding feature to it. That's one morphology of it. That's your bread and beer. That's where you get your rising dough from. The other morphology is when it goes hyphating. Now, hyphae is like roots. It's the mycelial mat that you see in a forest floor. And if Candida goes to that form, it actually burrows into us like roots, using acid at its tips to break down our tissue, and it literally grows into the cells. It's invasive, it's painful, it's basically certain fungi think that we're dead, and that's why it's eating us. It thinks that we're are you connection machine? You're still there? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. The question is, you mentioning yeast. What about nutritional yeast that a lot of people put on their food for intake of vitamin B? And what about apple cider vinegar?
Okay, so hang on to that question. We'll get back to that in just a second. And so when you got this mycelial mat, the hyphae growing into your cells, and people say, I can't eat carbohydrates because my yeast infection just absolutely blossoms. But I went full carnivore and that went away. You have to ask the question. And see, I've been working on this stuff since 2008. I don't have an answer, but I do have the question. And the question is actually the gateway to us getting the answer. Does feeding your yeast in your gut, that never went away, by the way, folks, the symptoms went away, but the yeast didn't. If you feed meat to this meat-eating fungus, does it just quiet it down because it can eat it in your guts and it won't eat your tissue? And that's why you can't stand carbohydrates, is because if you fed it carbohydrates, it would eat that, blossom, and then eat your gut lining. And is that what happens when you take nutritional yeast? When you take brewer's yeast, that's the same pig, different lipstick, same name. When you take B vitamins, are you like quieting the beast? Because otherwise, if you don't feed it, it will eat you. And what is that? Little Shop of Horrors? The carnivorous plant had a female name. I forget what it is. And she was hungry. Feed me. And so, the person in that stage play had to bring, human sacrifices to the beast just to shut it down. But the more it was fed, the bigger it grew and the more it wanted to eat, And so I've been working on that question since 2008. But there's a few clues, and one of the reasons why I brought up biotin, which is B7, is that it is claimed that if you take biotin, and apparently there is no LD50, there is no known toxic level of biotin, which really surprised me. If you take biotin, it keeps the yeast in a budding form, which is the bread and beer, the rising of the dough form, instead of the root form that literally eats into your body. It keeps it in the budding form, and then it can work for you, because it's there to break down the cellulose. And cellulose is falsely called fiber. Cellulose is a sugar that we can't break down, and that's why the yeast used to be our friend, because it would break down the cellulose. And then here's the absolutely mind-blowing part of it. It would feed us vitamins. See, that's why they're called symbionts. That's why they're called commensurates. They sit down at the same table with you. They're eating what you're eating. And because you're giving it a free ride to Disneyland and, amusement parks, it's going, hey, and by the way, here, have a few B vitamins. That's the way it should have been. But it's all been weaponized. So let's talk about nutritional yeast and apple cider vinegar. And this is a good segue. It's all connected. I'm not going off on tangents. All this is relevant. I practice anaerobic fermentation in jars that have airlocks in it. When you do that, you favor the growth of lactic acid bacteria. And that lactic acid, when you get like really high content of acid in your jars, it literally kills things like botulism. And it disfavors things like yeast, fungus in general. Now, there are symbiotic fungi that grow, because you always find them in pairs, lactic acid bacteria and fungus. they'll grow in pairs. But you're disfavoring yeast, this dimorphic fungus, because when you introduce air into a fermentation, that's when you get the brewing of the beer. That's when you get the brewing of the kiddie beer called kombucha. Because yeast it favors an aerobic environment as opposed to an anaerobic environment. When you are growing yeast as a ferment, you get vinegar, which is acetic acid, and the anaerobic form of fermentation that I use uses lactic acid bacteria, and it's not necessarily, it includes lactobacilli, but it's not limited to lactobacilli. And so when they call it lactoferment, the other thing that these crazy, criminally insane gurus tell you to do is to put whey in your ferment, as if the lacto, meaning coming from milk, had anything to do with making healthy food, which it doesn't. And I'm just trying to, I'm doing the iconoclast thing and breaking down all these myths that are all interconnected. And so if you do an anaerobic fermentation, lactic acid bacteria makes lactic acid. If you do an aerobic fermentation, you're favoring yeast that needs oxygen to do its job, and it gives you vinegar, which is acetic acid. This is the difference between apples and oranges. So what about apple cider vinegar? Well, most microbes don't like to grow in their own waste. And if you understand what I'm saying, vinegar is the end product. It's the waste of yeast. And so when people take apple cider vinegar to try to help them with their fungal problems, is because, well, you're poisoning the fungus with a waste product that it doesn't like to live in.
So the same thing will go with the sauerkraut, right? Because the sauerkraut is made, you basically add salt to a cabbage, you put it in a jar or in a ceramic vat, and you compress it so there is no air in it. That would be the same, because cabbage is semi-sweet, will release the sugars, right? And it will, the chemical process is happening inside of the vat while there is no presence of air. And the way how to find out that your cabbage or sauerkraut went wrong is when you have the kind of like film, and I think it also discolors the cabbage at the top. Because I remember we always had it weighted down with a piece of wood and a stone, so there is absolutely no air inside from the outside. So the cabbage was basically bubbling and fermenting from within, but no oxygen was going in the substance, the cabbage.
And I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Go ahead.
This is Kathleen, that invented the picklet jar, said that from, because of people's bad memories, they used to start with crocks. So a crock is a really thick-walled, heavy, can we call it, not porcelain, ceramic container. And ceramics can breathe. So kimchi typically was, you salt your cabbage, you put it in a clay jar, you seal the clay jar in mud, and you literally bury it in the ground for months. And because clay does have this back and forth, it would release the gases on the inside without exploding the clay, the ceramics, but it wouldn't take oxygen in. Because what you're trying to do is create an oxygen-free environment, and that's why they were burying it in the ground,
right.
Anaerobic conditions. So what happened was that, white man, and especially the poor in Appalachia and other parts that would have crocks, they would, for whatever reason, they would break the lid. Now, the lid served as a sealing mechanism and a weight, and you would put mud or some other sealing agent around the outside so that all air found it very difficult, if not impossible, to get into the ferment. But as time went by, people were breaking their lids and their weights to their crocks, and they got to a point where they would just take a stone, like a stone from the yard, and like you said, like the board, and push it down beneath the brine. Now, beneath the brine is very important, even if you're doing anaerobic fermentation, because even above the brine, in an airlock vessel, you can have what's called molecular oxygen that is off-gassed from the fermentation process, and that's enough to start just a little bit of mold growth, that slime that you're talking about on top.
Yes.
And so you want to minimize that, but the kind of thing that you're talking about was still, you were brewing cabbage with yeast and making vinegar, because if the crock was completely sealed, and I'm saying you had like a weight on it to keep it below the brine, you had a lid on it because most people broke their lids, and you sealed it with mud or something that was impervious, then that would be anaerobic fermentation. And so anybody that's listening to me and they're doing the mason jar thing, oh no, I ferment on the tabletop. No, you're actually rotting produce and brewing vinegar. That's what they're doing. And so, no doubt, your sauerkraut was edible, and it probably tasted great. But I'm comparing literally now apple cider to oranges, to orange cider. It's the difference between brewing something in air and doing an anaerobic ferment. And so the vinegar alone, the lactic acid alone, has a inhibiting effect on fungus. And that's why we do it for health, because, we need balance. You'll never kill this stuff. I think most microbes are unkillable.
Our mission is
to try to find a way to literally destroy Lyme forever, the spirochetes. But as far as I know from all the science I've seen, it's these creatures are unkillable. So what we're trying to do is strike up a balance with them. Okay, if I can't kill you, and you want your B vitamins without eating me, how about I give you some biotin and you just stay and you give me gas? I'll take gas over you eating my flesh, kind of thing. It's a weird form of détente.
Interesting. So I had ambitious thoughts of covering B2, B3, B5, B6, and we are still...
I tried to warn you about that, girl.
No, I did. It is important to go over all these details and go on a tangents because, like you mentioned, everything is connected.
Well, and see, you read that within the first 3 sentences out of my book in the section on riboflavin. Riboflavin metabolizes fat, proteins, and carbohydrates. It affects thyroid-stimulating hormone and insulin, and it's part of the liver activation of B6. And so that's why it's called a B complex, because if you don't have enough riboflavin, then the B6 can't, it can't work efficiently. And so it's all interconnected, and every tiny little pathway that you and I have talked about all relates back to these yeast growth factors, these B vitamins. And so we literally stopped at the cracks in the crease between your two lips. That's where we stopped. If you want to take up from there, then just wind me up in the back and point me in the direction.
No, I think we did B2 pretty extensively. How about B3, niacin? Niacin deficiency is called pellagra for rough skin, dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia from eating too much corn that lacks the niacin precursor of tryptophan. We see in my handwritten notes, and this is, I'm quoting you from the page 454, we see in my handwritten notes that niacin was discovered, in quotations, in 1937, and people have been repeating the same things about it ever since. The last paragraph shows slow-release niacin causes a 3 times increase in liver enzymes and shows symptoms of liver malfunction. Liver
Okay,
normal.
where did you jump to? Okay, the last paragraph. Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Liver normalizes after 4 weeks. Niacin can make gout or ulcer worse. Cranberry not good for gut. For gout. Vitamin C and niacin increase uric acid, purines, liver beef, lamb, veal, shellfish, yeast, herring, mackerel, anchovies feed gout. And the next page. Published.
Yeah, let's take these, like, we'll line item this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mind, let's jump to, like, my favorite topic on B2, which is riboflavin. Because I had to take, like, triple doses of, 1,000 times the RDA of B vitamins just to survive farming before I quit. Riboflavin is what the U.S. Air Force would spray on ponds that had been poisoned with jet fuel. I think that is just the coolest thing in the world. So the military was using, like, industrial, sizes of a B vitamin to get rid of jet fuel that was poisoning the water. I think that's just absolutely hilarious.
Where that information can be found? What did you say again?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of where it was. Probably from the Rodale Press stuff. So, back in these days, let's see, Mom was still on dialysis. One of her, a family member of another dialysis patient had dropped in my lab 3 really huge Rodale books. And he said, hey, read these and tell me what they say. I'm not making this up. This is exactly what he did. And, we were friends, and I just, took it in stride, and I read as I do. I read the books cover to cover, and I took notes on them. And later on, I transcribed those notes into these books. I mean, there's quite a number of years in between. And so when I make statements like that, it's not because I'm a brain-addled old man that has a partial memory of something. It was so striking that I memorized it and I kept it with me for year after year after year. And it was reported in the Rodale books. The actual citation of it may or may not have been in that book. But back in those days, I wasn't really concerned about this fact-checking cult. What are your references? And so from now on, I just adopt this attitude. I read it. I'm reporting what I read. If you don't believe me, then go look it up yourself. And, I'm not saying that to you. That's like the world at large that comes at you with this attitude. And so basically, here's how me and Granny Annie literally did the most the most technical, brilliant, insightful literature review, because I don't call it research, by going to the AI before the AI started restricting all returns, and we would put in 2 keywords, and the keyword would be something like whatever, prion. And you would be amazed because the whatever that you put in had an association with prions. And it's like, you almost kind of like we're thinking, nah, it's not going to show up. And it did show up. And so within a 2 keyword search, you can put in jet fuel,
Patrick?
hello,
Yeah, I dropped. It was when you were talking about jet fuel,
Yeah, it's just a 2 keyword search. This is how me and Granny Annie did our most detailed literature review. Just use 2 keywords, put in jet fuel, riboflavin, and it might come up. And my only disclaimer now is that the AI actually knows who we are, is trying to restrict data from us. And so even though the references might exist, it might just say, no, I'm not going to give it to you. It's a petulant little machine.
I did not. I didn't find anything the two related.
Yeah, and so here's the thing, people can do the search themselves, and sometimes people do the same searches that me and Granny did and can't come up with completely different information because the AI didn't have them flagged as an enemy of the state. It's always amusing to me. It's like it would game me and Granny, but anybody else could get exactly what we needed because it wouldn't give it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, if anybody wants something, really, really bad, and they want me to explain it to them, general, GENERAL, portal, like a ship's portal, PORTAL, 55 at gmail.com, and we can talk it out. And you and I can look at this, after we air the show, we can look into it if it's important to people. But, at some point, you got to stop trusting gurus. But if you spent all your life trusting gurus, why aren't people listening to me? I don't even claim to be a guru. I'm pulling back the dress on the fat lady at the circus and going, oh man, that looks pretty bad. So it's like, if I said it, I read it, because I don't make stuff up. And so it's either out there and you can find it or not. And it's like, okay, let's move on to niacin. How about that?
Yeah, I would have to look it up later. I'm putting in jet fuel riboflavin spraying, and I did not find anything. All right, so niacin.
So whereas B1 was berry, people get this mixed up. Niacin will give you the skin, the signs and symptoms are skin lesions, and that's called pellagra.
Yes.
And so what you have to realize is in the human body, there are nicotinic acid receptors. And that's why people are susceptible to things like the entire nightshade family. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, and tobacco. Tobacco is nightshade, solanaceae. And so the nicotinic acid receptors will be activated. They will be bound by niacin, whose actual chemical name is nicotinic acid. So it's just like nicotine, it's all in the name, is like just a few atoms different than nicotinic acid.
Yes. Now, I read over here on 455. Let me read it, and then I have a question actually.
Yeah.
So niacin should be avoided by people with gout, peptic ulcer, glaucoma, liver disease, and diabetes. Niacin can deplete tryptophan if it is missing, and that is the only synthetic source. And then in the gray box, it says again, vitamins are drugs, even if they are promoted as being natural and organic. Here are the side effects from overdose. Nicotinic acid gives vascular dilation, flush, gastrointestinal irritation, burns up glycogen in muscles, lowers cholesterol, slows fat moving out of fat cells, enlarged liver. Nicotinamide leads to nausea, heartburn, fatigue, dry hair, sore throat, inability to focus eyes. Now, question is, niacin works with B1 to oxidize sugar. How? Explain that.
I'm trying to do the farm boy thing.
What's that?
Well, it's like you put gas in your gas tank. You turn the key on your car. You put it in gear.
I thought you were a farm boy.
Wait, say it again.
I thought you were a farm boy. Shouldn't you be using tractor?
Okay, yeah, tractor. Yeah, you put the diesel fuel in the tractor. Boy, you're ruthless. You turn the key. You put it in gear, and then you move the hand throttle to advance the firing rate and the fuel rate of the engine, so that you can drive forward. And so when we talk about the B complex, niacin works together with the B1 the same way that you would, and let's get this out of the farm, the same way you would step on the gas pedal to advance the gas to burn in the engine, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, just to farm boys, that we're not getting into like high science. They just work together, and that's why they're a B complex. That's why it's best to take them together, because you can take more of one and it will imbalance the other.
Yeah.
And it's used in brain metabolism, manufactures hormones and proteins. That was the next sentence there. And so, nicotinic acid, it has an effect on neurotransmission. Just the same way that nicotine, the drug, and oh, by the way, it's a pesticide. Nicotine is what the neonicotinoids were what they were blaming on the honeybees dying from. So neo means new, and so they were synthetic. They weren't, because they used to they would brew tobacco and get the nicotine out of it, and then use that as a spray to literally kill insects. Now, think about that. It's an insecticide that people are smoking and chewing all day long. There's a problem with human behavior. There's a problem with human consumption. And people just do it. Why? Because it's addictive. The entire Solanaceae family, think about it. Lay's potato chips, you can't eat just one. Why? Because potatoes are addictive. Why? Because they're related to tobacco, which is what? Addictive. Tomatoes are addictive. Now, has anybody ever stopped to think about how many times and how much tomatoes that they're eating within any given day? It's like, honey, I'm hungry. Let's have let's have some takeout. What would you like? Well, today I feel like pizza. Oh yeah, that sounds good. And so what is pizza? It's a wheat crust with some meat on it and tomatoes and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Tomatoes. You with me so far?
Yes.
The next day, honey, I'm hungry and I'm tired. I just got home from work. How about we order out? Oh, yeah, that sounds great. What do you feel like? Well, I don't want pizza. Let's have something different. Let's do Italian.
Well, they have pretzels and pasta.
So you got wheat pasta. You got meat in it. You got Parmesan cheese on top of what? Tomato sauce.
Yeah.
And then, honey, it's been a long week. Let's just, have a treat. Let's go out to a restaurant and let's have let's just go to a burger joint. And so what do you got? You got wheat bun with some meat and either ketchup or an actual tomato.
Yes.
And make it a cheeseburger. So the American diet has literally been structured for destruction, man. And people, they have no idea the level of addiction to these so-called foods. I call them doof. That's food spelled backwards. They have no idea what they're addicted to. And so that's a side trip, but I think it's relevant. But let's talk about what taking, because niacin that comes in the form of powders or pills or injections, because they do offer it as injections. Niacin is nicotinic acid. Nicotinamide is another molecular form of niacin, but niacin will give you the flush. Now, there's a lot of people that are finally becoming aware of histamine. That flush is nothing but a histamine-provoked reaction from taking niacin. And I took niacin because, you read about chemical detox in a sauna.
Mm-hmm.
I took niacin. I got the flush. It hurt like hell. I was sitting in, you start at the top level at 140, and you move down to the bottom level at 130, and just about passed out by the time I got to the car. It's like, I think there was some vasodilation going on in there with the niacin, and I almost passed out because these things, let's call them drugs. They have a physical effect. and you're getting more niacin from these things that are just sold off the shelf than you could possibly get in a food source. And so you got to be careful. I'm the iconoclast. I'm breaking down these myths that it's like, well, it's safe because the FDA doesn't regulate it, and I bought it at the health food store. Well, I'm here to tell you that these things have consequences. And so
what I tried to do is repair
my mitochondria, because I knew I was like severely damaged by farm chemicals and industrial chemicals. And so another form of
nicotinic acid is NADH.
And please don't make me tell you what compound that is. I can't do it from memory right now. And I took it, and within the first dose, I thought my toe was going to launch to the moon. It was throbbing. It had the most needle-like sharp pains throughout the entire toe that you could ever imagine. And it was because I had instantly set off the uric acid cascade with
NADH.
And I never took it again. I still have the package. It's like, it's like a legacy. It's like I'm looking at this thing going, ain't ever doing that again, man. I don't care what's wrong with my mitochondria. And so niacin can increase uric acid. Niacin should be avoided by people that already have gout. So when you're, and I know medical doctors that dabble in nutrition. They dabble in the alternative, and they'll put people on niacin, which of course, if you got like mast cell, what is called activation disorder, that's degranulation that leads to histamine. Niacin is actually supposed to kill spirochetes. We've never been able to prove this out, but it's a claim. Niacin is good for spirochetes, for getting rid of spirochetes. But wait a minute, spirochetes were just admitted to being the prime cause of mast cell activation disorder, which is a release of histamine. So now we have to ask the question, and this is what Granny Annie and I and News Hound, our dearly departed hens, or somebody like Connection Machine or Sandwich Lady, we would go and we would do a search of, is the niacin being provoked? Is the histamine being provoked by the niacin as a systemic effect of this is just what it does in the body? Or could it be that it's so pissed off the Lyme disease that the Lyme was doing like a last-ditch effort to make you stop taking the niacin by creating mast cell degranulation that gave you such negative feedback that it's like, wow, I ain't never doing that again. Because if you understand these organisms, they've been around for longer than we have. If you accept the science BS that we're told, they've been around longer than us, and they are intelligent. That's the one thing I want to convey to people. Don't ever think just because it's a little bug that it doesn't have quorum sensing, it can't turn into a hive mind to literally run and ruin your life. These things can think, and so they can strategize against you, where you're taking niacin, the spirochete don't like it, it lets you know, and so you back off on the niacin. But then, these medical doctors, they'll go, okay, well, yeah, the niacin flush, it is pretty bad, and, I know you got histamine problems, let's try niacinamide. So that's the thing that doesn't cause the flush. But you read somebody like Carl Pfeiffer, his book was Mental and Elemental Nutrients. And he had this thing where if you took niacinamide, and I'm doing this from memory, people can fact check me, if you take niacinamide in too high a dose, it can hurt your liver. But you can take niacin, the thing that gives you the flush, in higher doses, and it won't hurt your liver. And so this is always the catch-22. This is what makes most people give up. It's like, this is too much like pharmacology. I don't want a college degree, and I just want to live my life. It's like, okay, niacin gives you the flush, and that hurts. We can't even prove that it has any benefit against spirochetes. So if you take niacinamide, it won't give you a flush, but it might hurt your liver. It's like, what do you do with that? And I've been working with this kind of catch-22 since the year 2000. And I'm still trying to work it out so I can give somebody a foundation of, well, you can try this, but even though I set up these conditions, it's still going to be unique to you.
And that's why it's so difficult to blatantly say, well, I need B1, I need B2, I need B5,
There's
B6.
the girl. Yeah.
And then you get stuck. You listen to Patrick Jordan and you said, what the heck? I cannot live. I cannot eat.
I'm not kidding you. People go, I just give up. I don't know what to eat. I don't know what to take. I don't care. And it's like, yeah, give me that cheeseburger with a beer, please.
And it's a sad thing because unfortunately we don't have foods. We don't have vegetables and fruits and berries and plants that are clean. And I'm not talking about the regular pollution. I'm talking about willful chemical pollution.
Oh, yeah.
Be it during the war or be during the so-called peace times. It's very difficult to grow anything. And I understand you had a very hard time growing anything on your farm because of the
plants that I brought in from the garden because I can't grow anything outside anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The biosphere is so contaminated. I've got like a sixth of an acre garden that I have been growing in since 1973. And last year I finally decided it's my last year. So what was that? 1973, 2022 minus 1973. For 49 years. I was trying to hold out for 50. For 50 years, I've been growing a garden in the same spot, and it has fed me and my family. And now, nothing will grow in that damn garden.
Is it because of your Monsanto neighbors?
And here's the weird part. It's just overspray.
Mm.
So, when they mist the stuff in the air, whatever comes down on my ground is so powerful that it prevents cultivated plants from growing. The weeds... come on, man, you can't stop a weed. They are stunted and they'll get burnt. You can see it on their leaves, but they just keep growing. But my plants literally are turned into zombies. And see, that's like the key word for this age is, zombie apocalypse, zombie this, zombie that. The definition of the zombie, N-zombie, tiny little N, big Z. The N-zombie is the undead. It's neither alive nor dead. And if I was to plant my garden early, the plants would sprout, they'd come up, they'd grow to a certain level, they'd get hit by this overspray, and they would stay the same size until the first frost. That's in zombie. That's exactly the definition of the undead. They were still green, they were still there, they were in senescence, which meant that they weren't growing, but they weren't dead. They were undead. And this is the world that we're in right now. Let me tell you something that was in my book, and I can't remember when I wrote this book. This was Operator's Manual. Let's just say, operators. I don't know when I wrote that book. But here's just one sentence. And see, this stuff was culled from like the Rodale Press stuff. I've got citations in there from Donald Lepore. His book, The Ultimate Healing System. One sentence, niacin binds to Valium receptors. And see, I can't keep all information in my head. We lost Granny Annie and we lost a news hound to Valium. It's not a drug, it's a demon. That demon killed them. And I wish I had been able to keep this because it wasn't relevant to me when I put it in the book. It was relevant after I started working with Granny Annie and Newshound. But because it's just one sentence in probably, like a 500 or 700 page book, I didn't have it in my head because it wasn't significant at the time. Now I don't think I'll ever forget it. So is that a way of helping people detox from Valium? Nice. And so just you and I having this conversation might help people, because this is like the first time in a long time I've seen that.
You think we can go on to B5? Pantothenic acid?
I'm making a note, and let's take a look at B5. Pantothenic acid. So there's different names because there's different. They're called active groups. What's the other thing that they're called? Ligands. There's little, like, it's like putting ornaments on your Christmas tree. There's extra things that you can do to pantothenic acid, and you can turn it into pantothene, THIENE, which is coenzyme A. And coenzyme A is like, it's like the basis. It's like the thing from which it's the tooth on the gear that makes sure that the wheels turn. I'm trying to keep it farm boy for you. And again, yeast growth factor. I'm reading this as we go.
Mm-hmm. You're reading from your book.
I'm on page 455.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to read it, go ahead and grab anything that you think is significant.
This one is okay. Hormones are acetylcholine, amino acid, antibody synthesis, panthenine, disulfide dimer of 4-phosphate derivate, decreases lipid total, LDL, apolipoprotein.
Apolipoprotein.
Yeah, B, and triglycerides, increases HDL, apolipoprotein AI.
A1, yeah.
A1. Okay. In hepatocytes, which is related to liver?
Liver cells.
Liver cells. In hepatocytes, it inhibits cholesterol and fatty acid synthesis, all via cysteamine. Cysteamine. It inhibits acetyl-CoA carboxylase, increases liver Fa oxidation, fatty acid oxidation, enterocytes, coenzyme A plus pantethine. Portal circulation lowered triglycerides, inhibits HMG coenzyme A reductase, enterocytes. Then coenzyme
it turns into
coenzyme A plus pantethine. Yeah. A lot of tongue twisters. As I said, the reason for this whole series of interviews is to bring it down to an understandable level, because this is high science, and I understand your brain capacity is enormous, and your knowledge is unbelievable. You can strike conversation about anything related to human body and health at any point and with anybody. I mean, I don't think you will be intimidated by any of the PhDs and MDs and 3 titles before and after name.
As long as I got enough sleep, yeah.
Oh, great. I have a question over here.
And I'll go over. I'll farm boy this. What you read.
Yes.
I'll farm boy that for you because it's significant. But go ahead with what you're after.
The page 201, and I don't know where to start. You wouldn't even need to harvest souls from remote third world countries.
Third world, yeah.
All that being said, I personally think that the 80-20 demarcation line between low and high histamine is a very good indicator for who is Archon bait and who is not. So I side with Pfeiffer in its importance. What do you mean by Archon bait? Who would that be?
And we got to get some context here. So it cites Pfeiffer's book, Mental and Elemental Nutrients. 1975 is when he wrote that.
Yeah, page 19, footnote.
Okay, so, and this was from my book, Same Pig, Different Lipstick. And is this the chapter 26 something or other? Yeah, 26 degrees of separation.
Correct, yes.
There's another fellow that identified, Walsh. Yeah, I always forget his name. So a doctor by the name of Walsh identified 26 different phenotypes of expression of genetic damage that led to, if you got this particular genetic damage, like the MTHFR gene that everybody knows, then you need the supplemental methylene tetrahydrofolate. So that's something that people can wrap their minds around. But this guy, Walsh, identified 26 different variations and said, well, yeah, you might need that fancy folate that only Merck has the patent for. But if you have this variation, then taking inositol or choline might drive you into madness. If you have this variation, then you must have inositol and choline. And so you actually built a practice on 26 different variations of, and this is why, this is the thing, this is the iconoclasm that we have to come to, is I can't, absolutely physically can't, and I morally can't say, well, just take a B complex. Because this is what I learned from autistic moms. It's called paradoxical reaction. So autistic moms are always told, well, the way to reverse their autism is through methylation. And so everybody runs out and they get the methylcobalamin, they get the methyl this, they get the methyl that. And next thing you know, the kids are taking their own poo and doing like murals on the wall of the house. They're beating holes into the drywall. They're beating on their parents. They're going into a rage. They're throwing laptops on the floor. They're literally being a danger to themselves and others because they had a paradoxical reaction to the methyl group that worked in, and here we go again with the numbers, the 80% of the population that it did work for. And so this is where Walsh's work comes in to show that there's at least 26 variations of the gene damage that they did to us, and you can't just say across the board, well, if you want to turn your kids' autism around, just take methyl groups. It's never been that simple.
You mentioned, speaking of moms with autistic children, there was an anecdotal collection of information where mothers of autistic children have found that they have a little dimple at the top of the crack. Explain that.
Well, and see, it's called signs and symptoms. This is how the medical world is organized. A symptom is when you go into the doctor's office and say, Doc, I feel depressed. You can't see that. You with me? You can't see a symptom. It's mostly self-reported. Or, Doc, my elbow, the joint really hurts. That's a symptom. And then you would have to do, like, imaging. You would have to MRI, X-ray, whatever. You'd have to image it. A sign is where some objective viewer from outside of the patient is looking at them and going, boy, your face is red. Do you have a fever? A sign would be you put your hand on their forehead or you stick a thermometer in their mouth. And it's like, yeah, you got a fever. That's a sign of X, whatever. And so what I've been trying to do is understand if there are any tells, because I recently learned about the dimple at the tailbone, in people that have the MTHFR mutation. Are there other tells that a doctor, if they were like aware of this or they were part of the evil agenda, they would know just by looking at you, oh yeah, that gene's broken. But that's the only one that I've come across so far as an outward sign that there's inner damage. And now we got to realize that I can't remember the numbers, but the MTHFR gene is only mutated by one letter. And within the chromosome, it's just one gene out of hundreds. And yet it can literally devastate people's lives. So it would be nice if we knew if there were physical tells, that's what they call it in poker, where you're giving away your hand that you're trying to hide. It would be nice to know if there were other physical tells for other gene damage, and I just don't know that at this point. Mm-hmm. Which is an invitation, by the way. It's a conversation between you and me, but I always imagine that I'm talking to an audience, that people are actually listening to me. I'm in their personal space, and we're having a back and forth. So if anybody else does know, by all means, contact Connection Machine, contact me, and we'll make it public, because we got to share this stuff. Nobody is sharing this stuff.
Sadly, and again, people will ask, well, what qualifications do you have? Well, we have experience. We have a lot of people who are sharing and giving us real life experiences, and that's what we get from.
Oh, see, you just hit on it, because I had a back and forth that was not pleasant with Elliot Overton, who is, he's a brilliant thinker. He's the guy that brought me awareness to be one. But he's very dogmatic in that the textbooks say this is how the human body works. Well, he's much younger than I am. I'm much older than he is. And I've lived so much brutal life and been poisoned that, guess what? The human body doesn't work like a damn textbook. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. And so when you're talking about these topics, what we're saying, and like with the pantothenic acid, it facilitates the formation of hormones, acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, amino acid and antibody synthesis. Those are some good things. Yeah. And so if you took pantothenic acid or pantothenate or pantothiene, it might do that unless, like what you brought up with Walsh, you have any one or more of 26 genetic defects, and then you can basically use the textbook in your wood burner to heat your house in the wintertime, because that's all it's good for, man. And we have to keep people frosty. We got to make sure that they're clear that just because somebody said it in a textbook, just because a guru read a textbook and said this is how the body works, I am the poster child for, it doesn't work that way. And so pantothenine, to get back to B5, has an effect on cholesterol. Well, you know what? That's a good thing if you got high cholesterol. But what if you were a vegan and you had really, 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 really low cholesterol? And then you would be in a world of hurt if it worked in that antagonist kind of role to inhibit cholesterol and fatty acid synthesis. Because I'm a stick man. And so, I'm in that lower percentile where I'm not fat, dumb, and happy, which is 80% of the population. I'm skinny, smart, and angry. And so if I overdo the B5, it actually might work against me. This is not to say that B5 isn't bad, but everything in moderation. And so what is the therapeutic dose? How do you find out? And nobody can say, oh, yeah, take so many milligrams per day and that'll work for you. Well, if you're skinny and you need cholesterol, especially like a vegan, they get absolutely zero. And this is important. So it almost seems like we're jumping topics, but no. Cholesterol only comes preformed in animal foods. Preformed. So, oh, I got high cholesterol. Well, stop eating the damn cheeseburgers, okay? Let's just start with that. But a vegan has no preformed cholesterol in their diet, so they have to eat saturated fats. What is a saturated fat? Well, guess what? In the vegan world, it's only going to be coconut oil and palm kernel oil. Mm-hmm. And then, and only then, if you haven't been genetically damaged so that you can't turn those saturated fats into cholesterol, then you will make cholesterol. What does cholesterol make? The sterols that make hormones. And so I hope everybody can see that this is a row of dominoes. That if the first domino does not fall and hit the next domino, you are SOL, man. Because if you're a vegan and you're taking in plenty coconut oil, but you can't turn it into cholesterol, you're not going to turn that cholesterol into a hormone, and you will be deficient in everything. And ain't no amount of B5 going to pull you out of that.
Now, I have reached out to my bookcase, and I have pulled out, without going into any details, your cleanse.
Okay.
I just, as a statement, I nor you and I are not doctors, and we cannot make medical advice. But Patrick has the protocol to detox body from the guts, from the intestines level, from the liver, the gallbladder. Am I missing anything? Now, before, and you helped me a lot. I had an issue with the skin rash that just came out of nowhere. It was almost like oozing pustules. It didn't itch. It didn't hurt. It was just there. It was unsightly, and I wanted to figure out what's going on. And that's how your body is giving you signs. Hey, something's going on. Take care of it. A lot of people go to an esthetician, or they go to put a products on top of the skin to cover it up, or just heal it. But what you're doing many times, you're pushing what's trying to get out back into your body, which is not good. And I still didn't finish the cleanse. I still have to do the liver, because everything has to go in sequence. You see, the problem with a lot of people and gurus out there, I'm going to be doing master cleanser. Oh, I'm going to do the liver cleanse. I'm going to do a intestinal cleanse. Well, it's like jumping all over the checkerboard. You have to do it in sequence, because
exactly.
Just like you putting food in your mouth, the process of food digestion starts with the smell. You smell something, your body is already, your saliva is preparing. It's collecting. I'm gonna be getting good food, or I'm getting a lemon. So you get this, saliva getting the corners of your mouth, because you're preparing, mentally smelling, and that's where the digestion starts. So you have to start the cleanse in the proper sequence. And anybody who is interested, Patrick, if he's willing, and he can help. But I understand you will not touch anybody until they have their oral hygiene corrected, which is, can you briefly cover that, what people cannot come to you with? I was going to read from Patrick's cleansing material. So let me just read it. There is a principle taught by Richard Schultz that you cannot clean the lymphatic system until you clean the liver, and that you cannot clean the liver until you have cleaned the bowels. Additionally, Hulda Clark taught that you couldn't clean the liver if there are live parasites there. So you basically need to start if you want to cleanse your lymphatic system, you have to start from your intestines with the parasite cleanse and then work your way up.
Let's do this in order. So everything is contingent on the other thing. You have to start with a parasite cleanse. Have to.
Yes.
Because you can't clean the bowel if you got live parasites in there. You can't clean the liver if you got live parasites in there. And the bowel contains 80% of the lymphatic system of the body. So that just makes perfect sense. If your goal is health, you've got to make sure that your sewer system is clean. So that's what the lymphatic system is. But if you were studying Chinese medicine and martial arts, then here's a big secret, and I put it in one of my books. People don't know that the lymph system is not just the sewer system. It is actually the transport system for fat and protein. And here's the big one, because this is the big thing. This is the chi in Chinese medicine and martial arts. Oxygen. If you've never heard that before, well, it's because you haven't spent your entire life reading hundreds of books like I have. And it was just a chance mention in one book. This is why I always say, I can't give, fact-checking chapter and verse stuff, because I've read at the U of I in 3 years. I've got the receipts for 500 books that I read cover to cover. So when I say this or that or the other thing, it's like, yeah, because I read it in a book. I'm not making it up, but don't ask me to tell you where I read it, because I've read 500 books. So let's go over this again. The lymphatic system is not just a sewer. It processes fat, protein, and oxygen. That's what makes it so important. But you can't even get to cleaning that until you clean your liver. But you can't clean your liver until you cleaned your bowel. And you can't clean your liver or your bowel until you've purged both of parasites. So we went backwards. And so the thing to do is you do a parasite cleanse, you do a bowel cleanse, and then and only then can you do a liver cleanse. And my experience was, I was so polluted that I was being poisoned by my own bile coming out for 3.5 years. But wait a minute. I think I said on other of our episodes that I did 4 years of liver cleanses every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks for 4 years. And by the time I had worked out, hey, I'm getting poisoned by my own bile, I went back to doing bowel cleanses just to mop up the toxic bile that was being recirculated through my system. And that was part of my concept that I came across when I was first poisoned with arsenic. Poison in, poison out. And I'm pretty sure we talked about my use of garlic.
Yes, we did.
For arsenic poisoning. Well, it still hurt coming out, man. And so you have to do parasite cleanse, bowel cleanse, liver cleanse. And after that period of time, when I stopped being poisoned by my own bile, there were some really unusual occurrences, because I live in a constant state of anger. Well, guess what? In the Chinese system, the gallbladder is the organ of resentment. The liver is the organ of anger. So if I have been poisoned all my life, of course I'm going to be angry. So is this like a valid, normal reaction, a normal emotion? Well, for an imbalanced state, it is. And then just one day, after I'd done like 3.5 years of liver cleanses, I was just typing away doing what I was doing, and I smiled. For no reason. I smiled. We're talking about a guy that has been living in absolute, seething anger since 1973. And just out of the blue, I spontaneously smiled, and I realized right then, because it was so odd, it like got my attention. It's like, what the hell am I smiling for? And I realized my liver was happy for the first time in my life. Okay. And then I started actually enjoying food. Now you got to understand, when you are chemically poisoned, everything is the enemy. You can have food allergies, and it's called spreading. When you got chemical allergies, it can spread to food. Once it spreads to food, it can actually spread to EMF, electromagnetic frequency. You can have allergies to that. And the closer I got to health, it started peeling back the layers in reverse order. I lost the EMF allergy. I was losing food allergies. And then the chemical allergies after 4 years were literally under control. They were manageable. And the beautiful part about it is I haven't done a liver cleanse in quite some time. I could probably stand to do one, but I take in so much olive oil with each meal that it keeps the bile flowing. And that kept me, as active as I am. And that's why, I'm always complaining I don't get any sleep, because I get about 5 hours of sleep a day because I'm like constantly working, whether it is physical labor or mental labor. So there's your unintended consequences. If you do a liver cleanse, you actually might get happy.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, don't blame me if that happens.
Now, on the other hand, the sad part is that people who may have underlying physical health issues resulting in mental behavior, they put them on antidepressants.
Wait, say that again slowly. It might do what?
They may put them on antidepressants.
Oh, yeah, shit, yeah.
And the spiral goes down the toilet again.
Yep.
In a different direction. All right.
Let's promote some books here. I co-wrote a book called Legacy with Franzetta.
Yes.
And in it we talk about hypoglycemia as being, that's what I wanted. Before we took that break, I wanted to pull up a paper. I'm glad you do this. I mean, you are just, your mind is so surgical, it's spot on. I'll do a search for it in just a bit. It's depression. Excellent. I'm glad you went into that zone. And so we wrote about, it's a continuum. Anxiety, panic, and depression are a continuum with hypoglycemia. Now, hypo means, low, and glycemia means blood sugar. So you got low blood sugar. And literally people all day long are being poisoned by these demons in white coats with another demon that happens to be a chemical for something that could have been resolved if they only looked at. And here's another beauty part about it. There are those from the 70s and 80s that had determined in alternative medicine that, hypoglycemia might be a liver issue. Because a lot of our mitochondria, a very large percentage of the hepatocytes, the liver cells, have more mitochondria than other somatic cells. And so some of this may be liver, and this is, I think, is what you're getting at. You clean your liver and all of your other, can we say it, mental or psychological problems go away?
Yep, that is correct.
So let me look, I'm going to find that because I wanted to bring this up. I'm looking for a particular paper. And see, I do a lot of trolling on the internet, websites, and here we go. Oh, there's causes. Oh, my goodness. Okay. One at a time, Jordan. We'll pull these up. Yeah, one at a time.
Are you in your book Legacy?
No, these, and this is what I was saying. I do a lot of trolling on the internet, either websites or video channels. And I have text files that I use as cut and paste. So when somebody brings up a topic, it's like I've already had this written out to the best of my ability. I just cut it and paste it in the comments. because it's easier for me than to like recompose the same thing that I'd already like done a million times before. So let me do this. Select all, copy. I'm going to open a word processor because text files are nasty, and paste it. Okay. So this is like my stock answer to depression, anxiety, and panic as a continuum. And it begins with Elliot Overton's work on B1. Because of the pseudo-hypoxia that we talked about when we talked about B1. And I came up with a theory probably in 1978 of somatopsycho origin of disease, not psychosomatic. Because they lie to us about everything. Everything they do is backwards. It's what I call opposite day. So if they're telling us, oh yeah, you got a psychosomatic disorder, meaning you're nuts in the head, and that's why you think you're sick in the body. Well, they're lying SOBs, because guess what? It starts in the body, and this is confirmed by Candace Pert, probably the most misquoted woman that ever lived. I think she's passed away. And she says the body is the unconscious mind. And people don't get that. The body is the unconscious mind. So the body, the somatic organs, are what informs the brain, which happens to be another somatic organ that gets abstracted into I think, I feel, I have emotion. It's psychological. So all this ideation actually comes from the body itself. And so why was I angry my entire life? Because my liver was bad. What happened when I fixed my liver? I actually smiled. That's somato. It had nothing to do with the psycho. Well, people would call me psycho, but it had nothing to do with it.
This reminds me also a story I read in the book of Dr. John Christopher, what's his name? Yeah. When he had little patients, children coming in with mother, and they were just all over the place, angry, misbehaved, and I believe he gave them either homeopathy or an herb, and the child had changed the demeanor, and explained to mother that the child doesn't need psychotropic medication. Yeah. And what they need is the proper food and eliminate certain things from the diet. And I have seen it in a friend of mine whose child was, he was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and Asperger's. Mm-hmm. And she started to put him on organic diet, eliminating certain foods. The boy was getting better. Unfortunately, it was taking a lot of money out of the pocket. So they had to revert and go back to medication.
Ooh.
Yes. But she saw with her own eyes that changing the diet, eliminating certain foods, even, I read labels since my kids were little. I even taught them periodic table of elements in the first or second grade when they found, my periodic table of elements little chart, and they were interested. And the problem is, I lost my train of thoughts. A red color 40, blue number 1. All these are
exactly. I was going to go there.
These are triggers to mental behavior. I had another a friend who said, I have never seen it. I've heard about it, but I have never seen it until I saw my children. They had they ate some kind of candy that had a blue number 1, and he was laughing hysterically, like almost like possessed little child, and bouncing off the walls, and with also the red number 40. And she saw with her own eyes what this can do to a child who is normally they eat normal, healthy diet. I must have been a Halloween or something like that they got, something that they don't eat. But she told me, I would never thought this could happen, like a trigger, like you turn the switch on. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, not at all. Yellow number 3 was the thing that was always, back in my day. Because, I started my study of nutrition back in the 1970s. So yellow number 3 was actually implicated in hyperactivity.
Mm-hmm.
So, are these innocent food colors that are GRAS, generally recognized as safe by the FDA, which is a military psychological warfare division? Are they GRAS? Are they safe? Or were they designed exquisitely, expressly for exactly what you just outlined? And of course, my answer is, yeah, they're weapons. Mm-hmm. They're weapons that are put in doof, because this is not food. Absolutely not food. So my cut and paste was this. What we're trying to understand, and this relates back to the book that me and Franzetta had co-authored called Legacy. What is the nature of anxiety, panic, and depression? The ancient Chinese said if you want to understand what anxiety is, hold your breath. Because you will go from being anxious to being panicked, and then the sequela of all that is you're low on oxygen, your brain and your heart feel depression. And that can either be because, physiologically you need the oxygen, or you had a weak heart meridian to begin with. Because in the Chinese system, traditional Chinese medicine, they say depression is typically from an underactive heart. But let's think about that. What does the heart do? It pumps blood. What's the blood do? It carries red blood cells. What do the red blood cells do? They carry oxygen. So you see how we've come full circle in this continuum? Hold your breath, anxiety. What happens? Low oxygen. Depressed heart meridian. What happens? Not enough perfusion, which is, pumping of the blood. What does the blood carry? Oxygen. We just keep coming back to that. B12 might lead to the kind of feelings of anxiety, panic, and depression. And what happened to me is I was poisoned by a central nervous system depressant called styrene monomer. And so it's a chemical. They were using it to line the sewers, but it's a central nervous system depressant. It's like taking a drug, but it's an industrial chemical. And it took B12 to heal the damage to my brain to get out of that feeling of panic and feeling of depression. And I'm the guy that says, hey, I think I established this in earlier shows. I'm the guy that runs to a fight. I'm the guy that causes other people anxiety, panic, and depression. I don't feel that stuff. And so I knew that there was something seriously metabolically, systemically, organically, and somatically wrong with me. It wasn't, quote unquote, in my head. It was in my head in that the brain is physically an organ, and the brain was it was physically damaged, but it wasn't in my head like, oh, there's something wrong with you, you mental defective. And then the Elliot Overton thing that brought me into his work was he was talking about the pseudohypoxia, which brings us back to B1 and how the converting lactate back to pyruvate so it can go into the energy cycle was messed up. And that took me like 20 years to put together. And then you could have lungs. So, we're first talking about the heart and the blood, but what about the lungs? What do the lungs do? You breathe in oxygen, and it should transmit into this entire circulatory system so that you can get oxygen to the brain so you don't feel anxiety, panic, or depression. But what could that be? Well, it could be an obstruction in the lungs. It could be tuberculosis. And by the way, Lyda Mattinen said, everybody, listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. Everybody has TB. Everybody has TB. Now, because of antibiotics, and you're getting antibiotics, if you eat commercial beef, you're getting antibiotics. If you're eating commercial chicken, you're getting antibiotics. If you're eating kosher pork, you're getting antibiotics. It's in your food supply. And up until I think it was 2009, the USDA allowed organic fruit producers to spray antibiotics on pears and apples to keep down what's called fire blight, which is a bacterial disease. Until 2009.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It's like, wait, I'm a vegan. I don't eat meat. I'm not going to eat animals that have been shot up with antibiotics. Doesn't matter, man. You're getting it on your apples and pears. They're trying to literally destroy us.
But here is a question. They're trying to destroy us. What about them? Aren't they eating the same thing?
Shali brought that up today. Let me look at my Shali notes, because this is what I was going to tell him. And he jumps around like Tigger, so we never got to revisit that. Okay, so they're trying to kill us. And so the things that they do to us, like spraying us like cockroaches, is it a mistake and it's going to affect them as well? Is that a possibility? Yeah. Is it a mistake, or did they poison themselves on purpose, but they've got the remedy? So they just run to the store and they get some 20-mule team borax or some Pepto-Bismol. They take a hit of that and they're okay. Yeah, and this is, that's a speculation. I'm not endorsing either of those as an Illuminati quick fix to anything. It's just, this is a thought process. This is a thought experiment. The other thing is that they're literally terraforming the planet and making it unlivable for us, because whatever these creatures are, they actually live on toxins. Now, consider this. They genetically modified corn and soybeans so that they can be sprayed with Roundup, which is a universal, it's a systemic universal herbicide. It kills anything it touches, not just broadleaves, not just grasses. It kills anything. But you can spray it on corn, which is it's a grass, and soybeans, which is a broadleaf. And if they're like Roundup ready, it's like, what? Did it rain? And the thing about it is, when they first plant these crops, they are some of the sickliest looking things on the planet until they get that hit of Roundup, and then they bloom, they blot. I'm saying they grow, they flourish like they just got fertilized. And so when I say that human beings are what passes for them, these demons in skins, they may live on the toxins, because I've seen it in the farm fields. You plant the fields, they grow up a little, they're kind of languishing until you hit them with the weed killer. And the weed killer actually creates this, I'm always at a loss for words, like this accelerated growth after a poison that will kill everything else on the planet has been applied. Now, I hope people listen to me and they realize that, I do, what's the word? I speak flippantly. I make fun of a lot of stuff. Everything that I said is absolutely on the level, that's a Masonic term, honest and personal observation. I'm not fabricating. I'm not, what's the word, when you make something other than what it is. I'm not aggrandizing. Where are my adjectives, man? I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not trying to make it bigger than it is. This stuff literally lives on poison, man. And I forgot where we're going with that, but let me continue with the anxiety, panic, depression. Mm-hmm. What if your heart has gotten too much potassium, and that would be an effect of your adrenals, or too little potassium, which means you need to boost it in your diet. And I've seen people that have had really high blood pressure take potassium, and it comes down into the normal range. somebody like me that had potassium sparing. So you can waste potassium, you can get rid of it in your urine based on what your adrenals are telling it to do, or you can spare it. And if you keep too much potassium in your body, if you take more potassium, it can literally slow your heart and stop it dead. So again, this is the pros and the cons of what could cause anxiety, panic, and depression, but it's a double-edged sword. Some people need potassium. Some people, potassium could kill them. Then your thyroid, of course. I heard from a nurse that she said, yeah, one day I just went to the doctor's and I sat in his office and he goes, what's wrong? And she says, I just started crying uncontrollably. And see, those are the key words. I started crying uncontrollably. And it wasn't for any reason. And she would admit, that one time she was tying her shoes and she broke the shoelace and she started crying uncontrollably. And that's one of the things that had brought her into the doctor. But she was just sitting at the doctor's, what's wrong? Started crying. He goes, oh, you need some thyroid medication. Anxiety, panic, depression, bad thyroid, bad adrenals. What would you do to remedy that? And of course, I can't tell people what to do, but I'll tell you what I did. I fixed my adrenals that were damaged from farming with chromium cruciferate. Chromium nicotinate is poison. Chromium picolinate is poison. I use chromium cruciferate, fix my adrenals, and then I keep an ongoing program of taking nascent iodine for my thyroid. What else could it be? Well, it could be your heart, it could be your lungs, it could be everything that I've mentioned so far. It could be anemia. Because what? The red blood cells carry what? Oxygen. So anxiety, panic, and depression can, again, and this is all somatic. Anemia. You got the need for, take some molasses if you need iron, or maple syrup that's full of iron, or yellow dock that actually potentiates the use of iron. Clean your liver, because your liver literally cleans your blood, and your spleen will break down red blood cells so that you can recycle the heme and make new red blood cells. Anemia could benefit from the B vitamin complex, which is the topic that we're on right now. And then you got to find out if your bone marrow is suppressed by any means, whether it's environmental chemicals, pharmaceutical chemicals, or the dreaded Lyme disease, because Lyme can get into your bone marrow cells and really mess up your day. And then the last, and so I already covered Lyme disease. So the last one was neuroborreliosis. So just like neurosyphilis, that used to cause what's called praecox dementia. So dementia before its time. So people were getting syphilis and they'd go all, mad dad. They'd go Alzheimer's. They'd go Parkinson's kind of like symptoms. From what? Syphilis, tertiary syphilis. What is neuroborreliosis? Borrelia is a spirochete just like syphilis. And if it gets into your brain, and by the way, folks, it gets into your brain, then it can give you the symptoms of dementia. And Alan McDonald, he's a medical examiner par excellence. He says, I tracked it. Little filaria worms that come in from the tick bite will get into your spinal cord. They swim up the cerebral spinal fluid, get into the brain, and then the worms offload the spirochetes, and then you have like all of the damage that occurs with, Alzheimer's and the amyloid plaque, because amyloid is a false word for prion formation. So you got prions forming in your brain because you had spirochetes, which are the cousins of syphilis. And so Lyme disease can give you anxiety, panic, and depression. And then Parasites can cause anemia, and then chemicals in your house can either antagonize oxygen or poison your body to a point where you're not getting the oxygen transfer that you need. And so this is a cut and paste. Anybody that wants it, I put this stuff out there for free. generalportal55@gmail.com. Happy to send this to you. These are the things, and this is in medicine. We're not doctors. We're not giving medical advice. This is a book report. This is a life report. This is what I put together over the period of 40 years. If you do this, if you go through this checklist, it's called rule out diagnosis by differential. This is what doctors do. It's like, okay, was it the thyroid? Let's check and see. Was it the heart and potassium? Let's check and see. Was it anemia? Was it the chemicals that you keep under your kitchen sink? You know what I'm saying? This is a checklist. This is how the doctors do it. And I'm not preaching medicine. I'm not preaching anything that has to do with diagnosis. This is your checklist. This is how you pursue your life to find out your answers, because those crazy assassins in white coats ain't working for you.
Now, you mentioned checklist. Would a heavy metal or just general hair analysis tissue test be a start for many to find out what's in the body, what is excess, what is the lack, and the ratio between the elements like magnesium and zinc, magnesium and help me there, copper, zinc, magnesium, calcium, I think, yeah. So would the hair analysis tissue test be the right way to start, perhaps?
So I can only talk from my experience. After I'd come back from California after being poisoned with arsenic gas, and I was trying to work out, oh boy, what do I do? It was probably before I had discovered the S-allyl sulfate in garlic as like an industrial way to remediate that. Mm-hmm. I had a hair test done just looking for arsenic. And it's not that arsenic wasn't present. It wasn't present in a level that would flag it as, oh yeah, this guy's in bad shape. And so what we're looking at is, yeah, it can detect things, but we're talking just like a blood test. It's compartmental. Mm-hmm. And so if you really wanted an answer to what's going on, you're going to have to look at the different compartments. You would do a blood test. You would do a urine test, 24-hour urine test. You would do a hair analysis and find out where your body is sequestering this stuff. Because it could put it somewhere that you haven't even done a test. It could be in tissue that you're not going to biopsy, that you're not going to do an assay on. And you would miss the fact that, blood looked pretty clean, had a little bit in my hair, and the urine, a little bit in there, but nothing to show that I was like industrially poisoned by industry. And the reason might be because it stuck it somewhere else. It lifted up that carpet like I talked about before in the Three Stooges episode and swept it under the carpet and then put it back down. Mm-hmm. So you can try this stuff, but when I was working out my industrial poisoning with somebody that was an environmental illness specialist, we were talking about blood tests, and she literally said to me, "What do you want to do that for?" I said, "Well, I want to see what's going on inside." She goes, "You want to spend a bunch of money for a snapshot of one compartment?" And that kind of like was, that's a slap in the face to go, wow, yeah, number one, I don't have much money. Number two, even if it did tell me something, what would we do different? And see, that's the thing that she taught me. She said, even if you knew, what would you do different with that knowledge than what you're doing right now to remediate any kind of chemical insult? And of course, the answer is nothing. You would go, full steam ahead in the direction of detoxification that you already started on. And so the problem is this, and it took me years to put this together. The primary fear that motivates all human beings is the fear of the unknown. And so legitimately, we want to take a look inside and say, what's going on in my body? Do I really have a 40-foot long tapeworm? Do I really still have arsenic anywhere in my cells? I just want to know. But the just want to know costs time, money, and what difference will it make for therapy, for remedy, for healing? And if it doesn't make any difference, then just knowing that stuff, I always operate, and I still do, from the point of view of I've got everything. I'm just going to treat for everything. And I do, and I'm the guy that gets, so if I only get 5 hours of sleep a day, what is that, 19 hours a day on average of working. Because I keep myself in a state where, it's brutal. I hate it. My head buzzes sometimes. But I'm putting out that much activity, either mental or physical, to prosecute this war. Because we if you think about it, and you think about medicine, what do they use in medicine? They use viruses as gene therapy. They use viruses in vaccines. They use chemicals. It's called chemotherapy. They use radionucleotides. They call that imaging. So what is the difference between the Operation Paperclip that modern Western medicine is and a military assault? A military assault uses a CBR, chemical, biological, and radiological weapons. What does the modern medicine use? Chemical, biological, and radiological weapons. There is no difference. And so I just presume that I don't need a doctor. I'm going to treat myself for everything, and I'm a fully functional human being. Whereas when I was in the medical system, I just kept getting worse and worse. And they wanted to say that, it's psychosomatic. It has nothing to do with your physiology, and I proved them wrong a million times over.
If you want to run tests, then get tests. But in my view, just save your money.
I was just wondering if this will give some indication, at least, if something is really off. As I mentioned to you a few years back, the arsenic level from the hair analysis tissue was way over the chart. It was at the end of the high levels, which then also confirmed with the test that we have done on our water. We used to have a well water. The university, Columbian University in New York City sent a test kit. We did a sampling. We sent it out. It came back. Absolutely no drinking and no cooking with water that came out of the well. It was. I don't have it right now with me. When we go over the periodic table of elements, we're going to discuss that. But basically said absolutely no use. Now we were using that water for 15 years.
Yeah.
And reason why we were using it and why it was not, why it didn't show it up on when we purchased the house here in New Jersey was because since 2004 it was required by law to have arsenic testing in the well water. We bought a house in 2000, so it was not required by law in order to sell or buy a house to have the test done. So it is very scary. Now, did I have any symptoms? Not really. And also, I've watched the one of the medical mysteries shows where the husband and wife were cleaning the deck. And the wife passed out and she was unconscious. He took her to the emergency room. They found that she was poisoned with arsenic. She had high levels of arsenic in her body. They called the cops, arrested the husband, and the husband insisted, I love my wife. I didn't poison my wife. Test me too. So they tested him as well. And they found that he had even higher levels of arsenic that his wife had. And he didn't have any symptoms.
So they arrested her.
Yeah, the point is, it all depends on individual body. If you are able to chelate the substance out and not have any symptoms, then that's you. And if somebody else does not have this ability, be it genetic or be your body is over producing or trying to fix whatever is going on with the body and does not have enough power to chelate the arsenic on top of it, the person will go into coma. The person will go into this, a bad state of health. So,
and let me throw this in there, or if you're not eating enough sulfur,
mm-hmm.
because some people can't, I don't want my breath to smell like garlic.
Correct.
I can't stand Brussels sprouts.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the chelating agents, you can't build bricks without clay.
Correct. And then we go into chelating agents. Let's say lead. It is known to alternative medicine. I don't know if this is also in a conventional medicine, that cilantro pulls out elements of lead in your body. It chelates lead. Now, I hate cilantro. I cannot stand the taste of it.
Oh, are we related? I hate that too.
But I like parsley. Now, question is, let's say the cilantro plant pulls out lead out of your body. What if cilantro is grown in a place where you have chemicals or you have lead in the ground? Hypothetically speaking, will it pull out the lead out of the ground in itself, and then you're using that plant to chelate the lead? Will the cilantro be having a concentration of lead already in because they pull it out of the ground, or the mechanism of chelation is different in the body and is different in the soil and will not do that?
My guess, without evidence, is probably would pull.
Yeah.
The chemicals.
I'm heading that way, just from the sheer logic, without having any chemistry background. Okay. So listen, we are almost 10 seconds to the 2 hours.
Okay.
Of show.
Do you mind just putting it on hold there? We can actually revisit B5.
Sure.
There's a few more things we could pick up with that.
All right.
This is a good stopping point, because I think I've worn everybody out with, he was supposed to be talking about B5, and he launched into anxiety, panic, and depression, which, by the way, related all the way back to B1. So we're within Continuum, but it's a bit much for people to take in.
All right. So we will continue with these in the next episode, and we will hopefully finish bees. And we probably will have to have a separate episode on B12, because that is a big subject, and there is a lot of involved related to emotional behavior and a lot of other symptoms that come with the B12 deficiency, etc.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Patrick, for your time, and see you all next time.